All right, well, welcome back everyone to another episode of the Health Made Simple show. I'm here with our host, Dr. Bart Precourt, who has been a healthcare practitioner for over 20 years, practicing a range of modalities, including chiropractic, kinesiology, acupuncture, functional nutrition and supplementation, and lab testing, all out of his clinic Balance Health Studio in Seagrove Beach, Florida, as well as virtually with people all over the world. He's also the founder of the Health Edge program, which is a cutting-edge health program for entrepreneurs and executives wanting to take their health to the next level. So he's worked with celebrities and athletes all around the world. And tonight we'll be answering your questions. So if you have them, chuck them in the chat and I will get them over. Otherwise, we've got a bunch to start with.
Yeah, as usual, welcome everyone. Nice to have you. And yeah, if you have questions, of course, if you're here on Zoom, just put them in the chat below. And if you're on Facebook, just send them in. And somehow they miraculously get over to Karen, and then she gets them to me, and then I'll answer them best I can. We got some cool ones tonight. Some that'll like almost create a little bit of like, I don't know if like controversy is the right name, but they'll stir it up a little bit, which is cool. Like we'll make you think. I think that's the right thing for it. Before we even start though, happy birthday, girl.
Oh, thank you. Yes, guys, it was my birthday this week. So yes, I'm going to celebrate all week, right? You got to make the most of your birthday.
No doubt. I think for a while I started to like downplay birthdays. Now I love them again. Like it's nice to have like a day about you. Like it only happens once a year for a week or a month, however you like to celebrate, but it's nice. So happy birthday. We're glad you're here on the show, and hopefully many more healthy birthdays to come.
Yes, thank you. I actually bought myself a new phone as a present to myself too. So yeah, all good there. Awesome. So on that note, shall we dive into the first question? Oh look, everyone's saying happy birthday to me in the chat. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, let's dig right in.
All right. Okay. So let's start with this one first. We were chatting a bit about it before the show. Is the carnivore diet a good idea?
This is good. This is a good place to start.
Let's kick off there. Yeah.
Carnivore diet. So let me explain the carnivore diet so people understand. It is a real thing. That's usually the first question I get. Is the carnivore diet a real thing? And and it is exactly what it sounds like. You eat animals. Like you eat, when I say meat, I also want to say like you eat meats. That's what it is. A carnivore diet is we have a meat diet, but meat could range anything from beef to elk to chicken. It could be the whole gamut. Most carnivore diets, and there are again some nuances here and there, will include dairy. So you could some cheese and milk and stuff like that if that's what you wanted there.
Eggs?
Yeah, eggs as well. Yeah.
Okay. Fish as well. Anything like any animal products.
Yeah, and so we're talking about any animal products, and we're also talking the absence of any plant products, and also it also Karen means the absence of any non-food. So any of these processed foods, any of these things that we're calling food nowadays, like I don't know, like cake and muffins,
anything from McDonald's.
All these non-foods are not in it as well. So carnivore diet does not mean going to McDonald's, 4 times a day, or Kentucky Fried Chicken or anything like that. It still means, you're ideally, you're going to get the best sourced of foods. And that's always the case. Every time we're talking always the best possibility of the best foods, right? So if we can get grass-fed, grass-finished beef, fantastic. Organic pasture-raised chickens, fantastic. So always that high quality. So that's really in a nutshell, that's what a carnivore diet is. It's a full-blown meat diet.
Okay. And so is this ever a good idea to not eat any vegetables, to be only eating meat products like this?
So I gotta tell you, it's really interesting. There's not a definitive yes or no to this answer. Yeah, clinically, observation and experimentation is always critical. So when we study like all around the world, what we recognize is that there's different cultures that like literally some cultures, all they have is meats or meat products or fish and fat and stuff like that, or maybe they're eating seal or whatever it may be, like certain Eskimo populations. And then there's certain cultures that mostly what they'll have is just vegetables, or just, they live off of, like roots and plants and stuff. The deeper we dive into most of those, we still find that the mainstay, anytime there's an availability to eat an animal product, protein and fat, it always becomes the first choice because it always gives the most gain.
Okay.
So that's interesting. When we really start to step back, and I love this question because I wanted to continue to stretch ourselves when it comes to nutrition and how we're treating our body. Because I really think that nutritionally, we have been just fooled. We've been told the wrong things. Told things like cholesterol's bad. That's one of probably the greatest myths that I know in healthcare.
Everybody stopped eating eggs.
Yeah. So here's an interesting stat, Karen. So let's just say you have carnivore diet and you have a vegan diet. The number one cause of death for both of them is heart disease.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes we forget these fundamentals, and most of the time, people that are leaning in the direction of, fully plant-based or vegan or vegetarian, the challenge is that it's not just plants, that it often includes a lot of the processed foods and carbohydrates and simple carbohydrates, which all of them, and here's the thing. So to answer this question the best is that we definitely know the impact of a keto diet, where we have about a 70%, in the true form would be about 70% fats of the caloric intake, about 20% of the caloric intake coming from proteins, and about 10% coming from carbohydrates. We see a lot of really interesting things here. We see inflammation markers go down. We see hormones go up. So as cholesterols go up, the healthy ones, we see testosterone go up. And that's something that we've really just got a grip on these last 5, 6, 7 years. Now we're starting to see, well, maybe more than that, maybe 10 or 12 years. That it's been around a little bit longer than that. Now we're starting to see some data coming out from, and listen, there's entire Facebook pages out there with 10,000 members that do is carnivore, week in and week out. And I haven't done this. I'm about to embark on about an 8-week program myself, 6 to 8 weeks. And what I always tell people, I don't know until I know, right? So I'm going to, experiment a little bit, no different than I did with, keto. One day I didn't know. And then one day I learned. I started the learning process. And what I learned with my own, I was eating copious amounts of fats. My cholesterol went up, and so did my testosterone.
Yeah.
And so, and Karen, we were talking about off air. So to the question is this a good idea or not? If you do it dirty, like dirty keto, dirty carnivore, no, it's not. And what does that mean? That you're kind of doing it because you like to indulge in meat, but you eat crappy meat? Now you're fried chicken?
Yeah, it's not a hot dog fried chicken.
Yeah.
McDonald's burger without the bun diet.
Yeah. And it's not that. It's not that. It is, we're talking about good, healthy meats, and we're not talking about a side of soda, and we're not talking about a plate of French fries. So the challenge with red meat, and I've said it many times in the show, I could argue that I could break down the nutritional components of red meat, a piece of beef, and basically come up with the conclusion that it's healthier than kale. It's got more nutrients in it.
Depending on where you get it from. What about that?
Well, let's just make an assumption that it's grass-fed, grass-finished.
Okay. Yeah.
It'll vary though. So this is a good point, because if that cow is eating grains, that those grains, not only is it an inflammatory food for the cow, but they're covered with glyphosate, and they have, essentially they're eating Roundup and all this other stuff, then it's just a whole different category. Then just not good stuff is not good stuff for humans. But that also, Karen, is no different for if we're talking about a burger or we're talking about a piece of corn, like a corn on the cob. If that is genetically modified, or soy, or any of the vegetables for that matter, if they're GMO'd and they got all these pesticides and these herbicides in them, we're still putting toxins in the body. But here's the interesting thing about, when I'm diving in deeper and deeper, and it's really got my wheels spinning about our genetic, our DNA and, just really like how the human body's evolved. And we think about it, like for the most part, like in a climate like ours, and probably in Australia, you have a summer and a winter. Well, in the winter time, you're not growing vegetables, you're not growing fruits, etc. So traditionally, and we did, it's matter outside the last 100 years, right? So no refrigerators, no boxes, no all that stuff, no microwaves. You go back and you look, man, what did they eat? And they most likely they would hunt down an elk, a deer, a buffalo, or something like that, and that would be it. And they would eat that, and that would probably be anywhere from 3 to 6 months out of the year, because all the other stuff wasn't available. And we're going to do a show coming up shortly all about metabolic flexibility, and that's a lot of this conversation, where ideal healthy humans could switch. We could go on a carnivore diet and be perfectly healthy, and then maybe come off it. Here's an interesting thing that is really kind of caught my eye about inflammation. It's piqued my interest is what it's done. So we had a while back, we had a gentleman on our show here, Dr. Gundry.
Yeah, we did.
He wrote the book called The Plant Paradox. And he talked about how the majority of plants out there, and a lot of vegetables, anything that has a seed, has a built-in toxin, has a built-in chemical to try to keep away predators. And predators are animals and humans. So what that means is there's a small inflammatory process that happens when we eat a lot of different foods. And sometimes we can measure them, sometimes we can't. Now, in his book, and what he came about was that there's something called lectins.
Yeah.
And lectins are pro-inflammatory to the body. And that's, of course, in things like gluten and all grains. It's in all kinds of stuff. Technically, it's in everything.
Yeah.
Different levels. So at least, and I think we've talked a bit about that, is if we're strong, if we've got a good microbiome, and our villi are working good, and our body's digesting, our stomach acids are working good, we're going to break down and defeat most of those lectins and be able to absorb them. But not always. A super high vegetarian diet with all different types of things, you're consuming a lot of beans, you're consuming things with lectins all the time, super high inflammation.
Yeah.
There's some other stuff that I just came across, and it just made me really start to think about like maybe we've been like leaning way away from some important, incredible nutrients for the human body. And then we're just this thing called inflammation. So, there's some studies out there showing that, so-called vegetarians have the highest rate of diverticulitis.
Really?
Yeah. And so it really starts, well, what inflames it? So when I put someone comes in my office, so here's how, it's right in front of my eyes. And I'm like, oh, I already do this naturally. If you have diverticulitis, I take you off all grains. I talk you off of nuts. I take you off of seeds.
Yeah.
They're all blowing up the intestines. So with that being said, if we can reduce the amount of foods that inflamed us, and we brought in foods that produced less of a byproduct of inflammation, maybe it would be pretty good.
Yeah. But so what about vitamins and minerals from things like vegetables? What about fiber that we need from things like veggies?
So the two biggest questions that come to my mind and should come to your mind and everyone's listening mind. So if you guys have questions about this, fire them at me. So, and I'm by no means an expert in the carnivore diet. But in 8 weeks, I'll have a really good experience to talk to you about it. And I'll do all my labs and I'll give you guys pre and posts.
Oh yeah, that'd be good to be able to see. Yeah.
So here's the thing. There's two things that got to come up: fiber and vitamin C. Vitamin C specifically. Okay. So vitamin C, because we do not make vitamin C endogenously. Okay. And it's water soluble, so it goes through our body, and it works as an antioxidant in our body. It helps bind collagen. It keeps our blood strong, keeps our skin strong. So it plays a lot of different roles. One of the biggest roles that it plays, especially ascorbic acid, as an antioxidant. So if you have less oxidation taking place in your body, if you have less inflammation in the body, quite frankly, you need less vitamin C. So that's me coming up with a random deduction of all these people claiming that they're on a carnivore diet and they're not consuming anything with vitamin C, because that's where you're not going to get it from meats and from eggs and all that kind of stuff. You got to get it from vegetables. And
would you supplement at the same time?
Yeah, you would, but a lot of these people aren't.
Yeah. Okay. And their levels are still, well, I guess a lot of them aren't testing, but they're feeling good.
But they're feeling good. And that's a real important part, about function and physiology. So if you're doing something and you're feeling really, really good, and really good it has to be many levels. You can sustain feeling good. Not like, man, I had 10 shots of tequila. Good.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm talking about.
That red wine makes me feel really good.
Sustainable vitality, sustainable energy. You're strong, fit. Your mind works wonderful on a day in and day out basis. You feel good. Your body's recovering good. Like you feel like, you're becoming superhuman. If you're feeling that way, you should look at what you're doing and be like, and ask, what am I doing?
Yeah.
So if you intentionally put a program in, say it's vegetarian, or whatever, or carnivore or keto, and you're able to sustain that and you continue to get that function, and then you stumbled upon something that probably we got to match them. We got to make how we feel, and you got to give it enough time. And I don't think we give things enough time based on where we're starting from. And again, we're talking about the carnivore diet. I'm not encouraging anyone to jump out on it. My biggest concern about having this conversation tonight is that people go, yeah, that's what I needed. Need a little more permission just to have at it with more meat and more chicken and more, whatever, without eliminating the other things.
Yeah.
Because if you continue to put in the simple carbohydrates, you are going to run yourself into trouble. And this is why all the studies out there aren't worth crap, because they never divide these two. They don't say, oh, meat is bad, and here's the study of people just eating meat. We don't have
Totally. No, they don't know whether you've had the soda before you ate the meat at all. That's not said. It's not said, hey, did I have a liter of Coca-Cola that day? That's not in the study either way.
100%. Did they have meat from McDonald's and then it came with some fries? So all the studies, and there's like Forks Over Knives and there's all these different like shows, these documentaries and stuff. And every time I watch them, I'm like, man, they do an amazing job. I'm almost hook, line, and sinker. Then I come to reality and I go, wait a minute. These studies aren't based on anything that is other than just a casual and associations. So it's important that we understand that. And I don't want anyone to take away today and go, man, I'm just going to have more permission to eat. That's what Dr. Bart said. The carnivore diet is good. So I'm going to eat meat all day long. No. Yeah, we got to decide. We're getting the simple carbohydrates out, because if you're using the simple carbohydrates as a fuel source and you're putting in a lot of meat and you keep on bringing in the carbs too, that's where it's going to get tricky for your metabolism. That's where it's going to get tricky for your body. And that's when we'll probably have some adverse effects of having too much, animal meat in your diet. So do I think the carnivore diet is good? I'm going to have a better answer for you to that before, and of course, January, I'm going to cleanse. So either way, this is going to shake down pretty good. January 3rd, by the way, is when we kick off the cleanse. January is the first Monday after New Year's, first Monday or Tuesday. So either January 3rd or 4th. I'll confirm that next week.
Okay. Well, we'll have early registrations open soon, so everyone can keep an eye.
Probably in the second or third week of November. And we're going to have to go early this year, Karen, because the whole supply chain is a little funky.
Yeah. So everyone's going to have to get in early.
Absolutely, positively. So you guys are, if you've been cleansing year after year, just know that we got to make sure we get it dialed in this year, later. So,
okay. Well, back to the carnivore diet for a couple, because I got a couple of follow-up questions here. What about if you soak and sprout your grains, nuts, veggies, whatever? Does that help with this?
It does help with it. That's what's going to help release some of those toxins from the lectins. And still, listen, I am not posing an argument for either or, but if someone says, hey, listen, what produces more of an inflammatory byproduct, more exhaust? Think of your car. Which one, more exhaust comes out? An electric car? What's those Teslas? Chevy truck. The Chevy truck is essentially eating carbohydrates, any source of them. They have a byproduct. That's the exhaust.
Or a Jeep.
Yeah. Or your Tesla that's really burning, it's not even burning fuel, it's burning electricity. But you get my point. A clean source. When you burn fat and proteins, it's like a Tesla. There's very little byproduct. when you burn any source of carbohydrates, there's always going to be more inflammation, which is really interesting because then our need for antioxidants in our body goes up. We need more of those things like vitamin C and CoQ10 and quercetin. We need a lot of these things because we're producing so many, and oxidants. We're producing so many of these free radicals. They're a little bit different. So it's soaking absolutely better. And the other part of it too is, and this is a little bit of, and I'm going to tell you where my deep dive has been lately. And I think last week, did I share a little bit about my knee?
Oh yeah, you did. Yeah.
So now I'm on a quest to heal my knee, and keeps coming back to, I have to heal my knee with like tissue.
Yeah.
So be gobbling up tons of collagen, tons of meat, tons of fibrous meat, tons of complete proteins that my body can easily use to rebuild and regenerate. So when I'm thinking that, and I have a damaged knee, I'm thinking about, I'm smart enough, I've done enough research and I've done enough work to understand how much vegetable proteins it will take to do that. Or I could just have
too
a
much. Yeah. Yeah.
So when I look at it in that perspective, I go, interesting. So when I'm trying to repair my body, so again, I'm not here pitching carnivore diet. I'm just kind of having a good conversation about it. And that kind of leads to where, again, like it leans on where the keto diet has been successful for so many. And remember with the keto diet, where people really got messed up is they go really well together, fasting and keto. It is the fasting that challenged most people. And they said, well, I couldn't go. Keto messed me up. And they were trying to fast for 18 hours, but they weren't fit enough to fast.
Yeah.
The keto, it was the fasting. So we'll just kind of table that now. So the fiber, another interesting thing. So this is interesting. I'm going to talk about poop for a minute. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's on the list of questions because, I mean, you're not getting any fiber. We're not eating any vegetables. How's that affecting our digestive system?
So I'm going to talk about my dog's poop for a moment.
Yeah, let's do it.
We walk around the neighborhood. And I've got a couple dogs, right? So they poop a lot. And so I have to be, my wife and I are really, really good. We are really good about picking up our dog poop.
Yeah.
I have poop bags in everything I own. Like I probably got one on me now.
So do I. Like I've only got one dog, and every jacket I've re-put on, I've got those poop bags like literally everywhere. But yes, you have a few more than I do.
Yeah. So we can identify all our dogs' poop. And here's how. So our dogs eat a carnivore.
Like each dog, like a different dog? You mean, or you talk about your dogs compared to other people's?
Sadly, I can identify all 8 different dogs I have. I can recognize between mine and any other dog out there, at least any other dog that is eating the standard dog diet. We'll call it the SDD, the standard dog diet.
Yeah. Okay.
Carbohydrate driven, fiber driven food. Okay. And this is the difference here. The poops from the carnivore diet that my dogs are on, and they get a little bit of vegetables. When I talk about a little bit, a couple of tablespoons of per day, their poops are very small. Very small. They're probably a quarter the size of an average dog's poop. Okay. Now, why is that? Because, so hear me closely about the whole fiber thing, because I wondered the same damn thing. I have been preaching fiber for 25 years. Okay. Yeah. Myself accountable to just being open to another concept here. It's like, how are other people doing it? So I always used to think about that. Well, the Eskimos were eating a lot of squid or seaweed out of the bellies. And I started thinking about that. I'm like, I wonder if they really do that. I know that was my theory. Like they would get their fiber from eating the seaweed inside the fish's belly. I'm like, I don't even know if that's true. I just made that up. But that was like my theory, that that's how they were getting fiber in the life. So hear me out. When you eat a meat product, animal proteins, your poops are smaller. And the reason is you absorb almost all of the meat.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. There's not as much waste product.
There's not as much movement. So you're absorbing more. So the other fascinating thing about all these people doing this, like, and it's like a whole tribe, literally, like, which kind of sounds weird, right? Like they're not, what do they call when they eat humans? What's that?
Oh, cannibals.
They're carnivores, right? So but I get in my mind, I'm like, man, these people are cannibals, but they're carnivores.
Let's be clear. Cannibals that's not what we're recommending at all.
Clear that they're not cannibals, and I'm not recommending that diet. Let's check it out next year. But no, this year we're just talking about carnivore diet.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is they're not, they're having fiber. Maybe some will say, well, once a week I have a handful of blueberries or whatever. So what's really taking place with the physiology of it is that when you eat an animal product, you absorb it all. You are using that. That's when, like, I go back to I can argue that a grass-fed beef is better than kale because you're going to absorb like 95% of that piece of steak. Yeah. Where when you eat the kale, you're going to get rid of about 35 to 40%. It's going to move through the intestines. So it's indigestible. It's not something we break down. So very, very interesting and that's how I know my dogs poop. So when I look around, especially after a day, and they dry up real fast because they don't have a lot there. There's not a lot holding on to the water. So they're smaller poops and they all turn white. There's nothing left but like bone. There's like ashes and little fiber. So any of you that are feeding your dogs like carnivore diets, you know exactly what I'm talking about. In 2 days, their poop turns white. The dog next door who's eating like a big, like kibble diet, that thing's a big pile of brown poop.
That should be motivation to move your dogs to that type of diet, right?
So that was always very fascinating to me to when I observed that. And then now I'm kind of reading all that and people are saying that because I was very curious about bowel movements, about fiber, about vitamin C. So, it almost goes right in the face of a lot of the traditional, when I hear people say, oh, I had cholesterol, so I'm no longer eating red meat. Well, you only eat it once a month anyways. Yeah. You're off. So another interesting stat, Karen, this one's going to catch people here. Our country, we are eating less meat now, almost like 30% less than we did.
I was surprised.
30% less than we did in the 1970s, and heart disease through the roof.
Yeah. Yeah. But also, what are they replacing it with? How sugar and processed food has just skyrocketed, right?
Yeah, and that's probably the bigger conversation here, whether I'm going to say carnivore is good or bad, is really recognizing that no matter what diet, that there is a plan out there. We've talked about here, we've talked about paleo here, we've talked about keto, we've talked about plant-based, we've talked about, vegan and vegetarian and now carnivore, not cannibal yet, but all those others. And the common thread through every one of those, when people say it's so confusing, I tell you what's not confusing is the foundation of all these diets. And it's that you eat real food.
Yeah. Take processed food out. None of them. There's no soda diet. There's not.
No.
It's not a McDonald's diet. The McDonald's diets are the ones where then they show you how terrible they feel after eating the McDonald's diet.
Yeah. Yeah. So if anyone's ever wondering, I wonder if I'm eating a good diet. And sometimes we put ourselves almost in diet jail. I'm in this camp this week, and this is all I can do. And listen, I get it. Cause sometimes that's how we break through. That's how we heal things up. And that's how clinically, and I share that with you all the time. There might be someone who I put on a vegetarian diet. And then sometimes I put people on a carnivore diet. And in the past, I've used carnivore diets mostly when there's been candidas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'll just move them in that direction as far and as hard as I can, even if it's just 10 days, I really haven't ever done it past 30 days for anyone. So I'll be curious in my own body just to kind of see what takes place here. So that's a lot of conversation around the carnivore diet. I will report back. Do you have more questions on that one?
Yeah, just a couple. A lot of people have a hard time breaking down protein due to low stomach acid and enzyme production. Is that someone that should avoid the carnivore diet?
Yeah. So this, and I told Karen this a little bit off air. I do believe that if you were going to lean into a carnivore diet, it should go in 3 phases. I think that you should cleanse your body like we do in January to rehab. I know we call it a cleanse. It's rehab for your digestive system. It's a full-blown timeout for the things that are harder. And usually when it's harder, has a greater reward. like meat, right? Meat is harder to break down than a donut. What gives you the greater reward? So that's how we got to think. If it's harder to break down, maybe there's a bigger benefit to it. And there's no doubt about that when it comes to animal proteins, collagen specifically. And whoever said that is very, very, they're understanding that you need a very strong acid, a low pH, 1.5, 2.5, to be able to break down beef. And, our bodies are capable of doing that. But if we're putting a lot of carbs in there, simple sugars, and we're putting in medications, just all kinds of different stuff, no chance. And that's why a lot of people do have a challenge here. So I think that there should be almost like a stair stepping into carnivore. And again, because I haven't completed a good program myself of it, this is just a little theory, but this is how I'm going to go about it. Getting myself prepared where I've cleansed. Then I'm going to be full blown keto. I'll get myself into ketosis and pull out that last 10% of carbohydrates down to 0. Now, I've been real close to that, Karen, before. Like I've gone to the point where I've been at, 5 and 10 carbs per day. And the only difference would be that I was still getting a lot of my fats from some of the plants, and I'm going to pull those out as well. So that'll be tricky. That'll be a little tricky. But to answer that question, I think that you should probably prepare yourself. And I think that's a very educated approach right there. And then probably also use some digestive enzymes. So when I think about, there's going to be some deficiencies here that I would foresee, vitamin C being one of them, and digestive enzymes, no doubt. I eat red meat if I'm lucky once a month.
Yeah.
I gotta imagine I'm going to be eating like 3, 5, 10 burgers a week. Yeah.
It'll be interesting.
So, I tell people this, listen, this is how it works. Like I'm in practice. Years ago, when I first started intermittent fasting, it was so brutal on me. And I'm so glad I didn't quit, because I felt as though this was the worst joke in the world. And I was doing it with a bunch, a bunch like Dr. Pompa and Dr. Cole, and we in Ben Greenfield, we're all doing this thing together, and we started fasting for 4 days. And I'd never done it before in my life.
Oh yeah.
Guys are as crazy as everyone thinks they are. It was awful. I felt bad. Everything about it was bad for me until I got my body prepared to do that. Now, no big deal. So we're going to see.
Yeah. Awesome. And then, you kind of touched on this, and we've got another question about cholesterol. Like is your cholesterol going to go up?
Well,
I need to be concerned or watch their cholesterol if they were doing it.
No, and that again, I truly believe, when I think of all the different health myths that are out there, I think cholesterol is the number one. I don't even know who's a close second. Karen, the reason there's studies out there saying the higher
that makes you fat. That's a pretty.
Yeah, that's pretty fire up there too. There are solid studies out there that show the higher your cholesterol, in the good kind, right? So we got to be able to understand how to break it down. But your higher cholesterol you have, the better hormones you have. How about this? The higher cholesterol you have, the longer you live. Literally, it's an all-cause mortality decreaser. It decreases your cause of mortality. And we have so mixed it up, and our doctors are so ingrained with, it's trained in their bodies that a lot of them will never see the light. They'll never see the difference. Some have, which is refreshing. But I have no concerns about my cholesterol, and I'll be monitoring it. Like I'm going to be curious. I'm going to be doing my blood work every 30 days to really, really get a good peek at here. And also so I don't something bad doesn't happen.
But yeah, so it's good. It'll be good to test. And what makes me so sad when you say that is that doctors will only be like, the cholesterol only has to be sometimes a little bit high, like a little bit over their number. And then somebody's put on statins or on other medications. And what you're saying is there's potentially benefits to being at that level.
I just saw a paper published, and not published, a paper presented. And there's a big difference there. It's not like a peer reviewed, but it was presented, and this guy's on a carnivore diet, and he monitored his blood, and his cholesterol went up over to 400. Okay. As a practitioner, that would give me some alarm.
Yeah.
Bad or indifferent. That's pretty high. And he was like, nah, man, I'm feeling too good. I'm not changing it. So he started to monitor in his own blood. He started to draw it daily.
Okay.
And this was the shocker. This has really got me scratching my head. Like, this has just been some eye-opening stuff. And that's what it's all about. Like, we got to keep our eyes open. We got to ask questions. We got to be willing to bucket a little bit. So the guy started taking his cholesterol every single day, and it was changing over 100 points a day.
Wow. Like, depending, just
and when
going up and down, around, like, just, wow.
Yeah, so he would, maybe it wasn't a day, 100 points a week.
Yeah. Okay. Either way, it's big changes.
Big changes. And that's, and I know it's not realistic for anyone out there to be checking their blood on a regular basis and getting the panels back, but that was the reality of it. And so that how you feel is really important, and not to bail the moment that it doesn't feel good, because maybe the prize is at the end here. So pretty long conversation about the carnivore diet there, but nonetheless, it was asked, and I am not ruling it out, and I will give you guys feedback as I go. I'm looking forward to eating like a turkey by myself on Thanksgiving.
Oh my God. All right. Well, maybe you'll have to take some photos. Oh, all right. Well, we got another question here on Facebook. What's the best way? And we have talked about this a bit. What's the best way for sleep as I get older? I don't sleep, and yes, I take my magnesium.
All right. So when it comes to sleep, we always want to kind of break it down a couple different categories: having a hard time falling asleep, staying asleep, or when you get up, are you still tired? Yeah. So what my think is going to be is, you say you're getting a little bit older, and I gotta make a comment about an older patient I just had the other day. I shouldn't say older, like, because I'm creeping up on it. But here's most likely it's you're waking up in the night. So a couple of things. So make sure you have that magnesium. If you're not already, try the herbs and do them separately. Try ashwagandha first. There's something called ashwagandha forte, and take 2 right before bed. It'll help your hypothalamus on the HP axis, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis. And there's a good chance that your blood sugars are getting a little wonky, but also pay attention to your diet. I find that a lot of people age. Here's a couple things, speaking of the carnivore diet. They're eating less protein. It means they're eating less fat, and they're eating more carbohydrates because it's simpler on their gut. It's harder for them to break down. So they have a blood sugar imbalance in the middle of the night. And that's very common that I'll see that. So let's see if you can get some good, healthy fat snacks near the end of the night, healthy ones, right? And that might be like a nut butter for you, something like that, like a little nut butter, like a, almond or cashew butter snack. And maybe that will help balance things out. If you have the magnesium, get at least 300 milligrams in the evening. Try the first herb is ashwagandha forte. And then, give it some time. There's a couple of things I'm going to roll through. Next, try kava. And then after that, try a CBD oil.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but give each one of them a solid 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And you may find that a little concoction of the 3 of them will keep you asleep at night.
Love it. Awesome. Okay, cool. Next question here. How much protein is adequate per day? I've read that anything over 40 grams, the body breaks down to sugar instead of amino acids. But trainers suggest body weight in grams minimum, especially with resistance training, which would require protein shakes, etc. Also, would amino acids be better to take to absorb, especially essential aminos? Thank you.
All right. So last part of that, no, I would prefer that you eat them instead of taking the aminos.
Eat food.
Yeah, eat food. I know it's pretty popular out there, but I'd still say eat it. The second part is, I don't believe in the gram per body weight a day. There's a couple of factors here. So if your diet's clean, and because you're here on the Health Made Simple show, I'm going to make an assumption that you have a pretty clean diet, because you're going to run into some trouble here. You start plowing high levels of protein in, and you have simple carbohydrates. Your body isn't going to need to use that protein as an energy source. So yeah, it's going to convert it into glycogen, which is another source of sugar. And with that being said, the body's very intelligent. So if it is converting it into sugar, it's on an as needed basis. So I get that. And I'll often encourage people to be mindful of their overall protein intake. Typically, Karen, there is a way for us to determine if you have access to. In our office, we have something called an in-body machine. It measures your body weight, your percent body fat, your skeletal lean muscle mass. Roughly, roughly this is, you can take your lean muscle mass and divide that in two, and that would be your benchmark on the low side. So someone like myself, I forget my actual numbers here, but anyways, let's just say that it was, you're 140 pounds, which I think that's what I'm about 140 pounds of lean muscle mass. Then divide that in 270. That would be my benchmark low of protein. And then on days I'm training and working out hard or using a lot of effort, I might go up as much as doubling that, but not every single day. So there's a little bit of a yes to what you're hearing there, in the sense that you might get up to a gram per day, but those are only really hard working out days, and your body needs it, that simple law of supply and demand. And again, preferably from good foods, like foods that have the full amino acids. So those foods, again, if you can go with the animal ones, you're digesting them good, that's going to be the easiest bang for the buck. And be mindful, if you're consuming a lot of proteins with carbohydrates or processed food, it's a no-no. Again, so when I see people like go to the gym and then they're killing it at the gym, they're going Chick-fil-A, man, you're killing yourself. Like it's not a long-term strategy. And I know some people do it, and but it's not a super long-term strategy. It's eventually going to backfire.
It's not a superhuman strategy.
Oh, not a superhuman strategy.
Okay. Another question on protein. Are there plant foods which have complete protein?
Yeah.
And are there combinations of plant foods that you can use for that?
Yeah, I don't know all the different combinations. That's where it gets a little tricky. But pea protein, hemp protein, for the most part, I believe both of those are complete protein. So you can use those in your shakes and stuff like that. So that's an effective way to do it. Probably the most complete would be an animal protein called whey protein, but it's not for everybody. In this, again, where you got to kind of know your belly, and on all your proteins, you might try pea and it might blow you up. There is lectins in pea, so here's what you do want to know, though, that your body will have an easier time facilitating the amino acids from an animal protein than it will from a plant protein. That much we know. It's going to be, like is like. So your body is like an animal. So it's going to be able to absorb that tissue, those compounds a little bit easier than breaking it down out of the plant and then converting it in such a way that you can absorb it.
Yeah.
But we do, at our cafe, we have a lot of vegetarian based shakes and stuff like that we'll use. You can choose, if you wanted a whey protein, but a lot of people just choose, they want a pea protein or vegetarian protein.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Oh, next question is for me. We got a question for me.
Yes, we do.
You had this question for me. So how people were wondering, how are things in Australia, and am I planning to visit the US again soon? So how are things in Australia? I know there's a lot of news in the US about lockdowns in Australia. We have had some cities that have been under a lot of lockdowns. So one of our cities, Melbourne, I think they've just done 240 days or something over the entire pandemic of lockdown, which is a really long time. But we are starting to open up, and my state, so every state is quite different. My state hasn't had the lockdowns that other states have had. We've had a pretty normal day-to-day life here, except that I can't leave my state, and I can't really leave my country. So Australia's travel restrictions are still in place. You have to apply for an exemption to be able to leave. So I won't be coming to the US anytime too soon, especially since I think apparently they're going to put a vaccine mandate on tourists entering the US, which will unfortunately include me. So I'm really keen to come over soon, but I don't think it's going to be. I definitely don't think it's going to be in the next 6 months or so, until some of these things maybe change.
So I have questions for you, and I guess questions if they are curious. So you have different states, and you can cross the border.
So it depends. It depends on the state. Okay,
so if you're driving down the highway, and all of a sudden you go from your state to the, is there like a border patrol there?
Yes.
Okay.
So we don't have as many states as you, but there is. My state is like Western Australia. We're quite isolated. So we've always got a border anyway, because we don't actually let like fruit and vegetables come across. We've got very sensitive ecosystems. So we've actually got border controls regardless. But all states, when one state has an outbreak of COVID, there's borders put in place so that people can't go in between states.
Okay.
So all our restrictions are based on risk levels of a state, depending on how many cases there are. Because in Australia, we have, like in our state, we've had 0 cases of COVID for, I don't know how many months now, 6 months or something. So we don't have, in Australia, we've got a 0, like we've been doing no cases of COVID. So because my state has 0 cases, if Victoria has cases, then WA closes the border to Victoria. You can come in from, like you could drive from South Australia to Western Australia, but you couldn't come from Victoria because Victoria has COVID cases.
Got it. So
Does that make sense? Sounds complicated.
yeah, no, I guess. So basically you're locked in your state one way or another, like kind of.
I've been locked in my state. Yeah.
So, all right. So just FYI, my household has had more cases than your whole state, which is whatever, right?
Yeah. We had 9 deaths in our state over the whole pandemic.
Okay. So, all right. So let's go. I'm so curious here. So in Melbourne, you say they've been clocked down for 2 days. So
not in a row,
but
over since March 2020.
So can they go outside? Can they go outside their house? Can they go hang out? Can they go throw a football? Or do you guys? Whatever.
We kick footballs. Yeah. So it depends on the lockdown that they do, but most of the time they've been really strict. So you can go out for an hour to exercise a day, and you're meant to stay within 5 kilometers of your house. So it's pretty, when it is in lockdown, it's pretty strict lockdown. You are staying, when we started in March 2020, we had that here where I could leave my house for an hour a day within 5 kilometers of my house. And that was the lockdown. Everything closes except essential services, supermarkets, hospitals, gas stations, but like restaurants, cafes, department stores, all shut down through a lockdown. So
that's been a long time. Are they out of business? Like what happens?
So we have a lot of government funding for, like we've got a lot of, I don't know the number, but there is a lot of government funding that has gone into these businesses, people that have lost their jobs, people that haven't been working. But in saying that, yes, businesses have 100% suffered, and a lot of people have lost businesses through that time, 100%.
Yeah, it's all well, thanks for the update. And it's all like it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy that we're here in this time and space, and here in the States, it's it's like literally it's different. I have family up in Connecticut, and they're living in an entirely different world than we are down here in Florida. I'm very grateful and very blessed. And it's hard for me when I talk to my family and we have conversations and the things that they have to deal with on a daily basis, relative to here in Florida. We have moved. I feel like we have moved on for Florida. Like we're ready and we're capable of moving on. We know our strategies, like everyone does. If you get sick, you go get monoclonal antibodies, you get yourself some ivermectin, do vitamin C, D, and zinc.
We're not doing the things like that. And I mean, the lockdowns have been, we've had very, very low numbers and deaths in Australia. So there's been really low cases and really low deaths, but that has been, I guess that's been the goal from doing it. But in exchange, we've had a lot of lockdowns. So
there's definitely a conversation I think we could spend like 7 hours on.
Okay.
But
we will be starting to open up. I'd love to come to the US. I'll be letting you all know, oh my God, we're going to do live shows, and it's going to be like an amazing thing when I finally get there, but it might be 2023, guys.
Wow. Okay. Well, yeah. All right. We'll keep doing the thing. But
keep watching.
Yeah.
So, and reach out to me anytime people have questions. I think that the media has a lot of different ideas. Not everything that, as with any topic, really, not everything you see in the media is necessarily happening here in Australia. I think things are exaggerated a little bit. So,
but I tell you, like, when you say you're not allowed out of your house but an hour a day, that isn't much. Like, if that's real, that's probably more than what I would have exaggeratedly thought.
Yeah, no, that's how we do a lockdown. And I mean, in terms of getting to 0 cases, like it works. If you do that to your population, you have no cases.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's no doubt. I've said it from the beginning, if you don't want to get COVID, just go hide in a corner. Like you won't
Yeah, you can hide from it. It does. Yeah, there's definitely been and we're not, WA is where, so we're getting, every state is getting closer to that. We've got like a vaccine, once we get to a certain level, we'll start to open up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, that's getting closer, and but we're still not seeing any cases here, which is interesting.
Hey, listen, at least they're having some success doing it. Where like we did the lockdowns, maybe not as extreme, like in different states here in our country, and they weren't getting any different rates than Florida was getting. We just been like partying the whole time and letting it rip. That's kidding. Yeah, but like literally, like California and Connecticut and New York and all these states are making us like frown and say like, oh, we're crazy and reckless down here. The stats aren't any different. I want to say like we now, we've been open, right? We've been open.
Yeah.
Let's do this. I think we're the third lowest. I could be wrong, so someone will correct me here, but I think we're the third lowest per state percentage in the whole country now.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Other part of this was to reach herd immunity, which
yeah, I mean, none of us have any natural immunity. We've obviously got vaccine immunity, but there's a really small number of people in my state that have ever been exposed to COVID. I haven't been exposed to COVID. I don't know anybody in my state that's had COVID. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Well,
we'll see how that goes. We'll keep you posted. We'll see how it progresses as we start to open up, because that will be the next interesting thing for Australia, will be how we change our strategy. Because obviously this is starting once we hit the vaccine levels, we're going to start to open up, but there's still going to be cases. So it's going to be difficult to see how they manage. Are we still locking down? What's going to happen? Yeah. Keep you posted, guys.
Yeah, please do.
Day to day, I can hang out at the beach and walk my dog and do what I like. So
come in Florida and you can get back into like how we roll down here in Florida. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Next question.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a holistic approach to help ADD and ADHD in children?
Yeah, and I guess while we're at it, let's cover adults as well. It's
I feel like I've looked at a lot more people kind of talking about kind of not being diagnosed as children and being diagnosed as an adult, and then if we almost go like, is it some of the symptoms, is it different with women? I kind of see a lot like a few things. I don't know whether it's just targeting me, but that it's a little bit different in women and girls sometimes, even as children.
Let's when with ADD and ADHD, the bummer, Karen, is this very like vague test that it's like a questionnaire. Are you aggressive? Do you have aggressive behavior? Do you forget easily? Do you not like to finish tasks that you start? That's literally a question. So like, how many of us do that? Like, right. So, do you have a temper? All right. Like, so we go on and on. Like, there's all these different questions that they go through. Do you have decreased, sleep problems? Do you have cognitive issues? Do you have you not want to start? Do you fight to start a task? And as adults, we don't fight anyone else but ourselves. We just continue to kind of move on and like start the next thing, start the next thing, start the next thing, start the next. And that next thing might be a conversation. Like, we can't stay on a conversation. We can't focus on a task. So literally the questionnaire that would be available for both children and for most adults, I'd say 70% of us would all fail the test. And meaning that we'd all labeled with ADD and ADHD. And especially when we were growing up, we would have been like, it would just be common that everyone got diagnosed with it. Now, that being said, I don't want to belittle that some of the behavior patterns in children are really expressing this attention deficit, like this destructive behavior patterns.
Yeah.
And this is really close to my heart because my younger brother basically had this behavior problem for his entire childhood. Now, with that being said, the challenge most people have and most therapists have out there, and most moms and dads, and every mom out there with a child that's a little bit on that ADD category, ADHD category, would agree with this, that it is relentless and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And the exhausting part of it is this, and this is where we have to step back in this. 99% of the time, we're trying to correct the behavior.
Yeah.
And you cannot correct it. The challenge here, it is a deficiency, a nutritional deficiency, a biochemical inadequacy, a deficiency, in an imbalance, and we're trying to correct it with behavioral patterns.
Yeah.
So the common thing that comes out of the mom and dad's mouth is don't, stop, quiet down, stop moving, hold on, wait. Repetitive, hundreds of times a day. I get, stop that, don't, stop, quiet down, come over here, back up. Well, don't. And those are all behavioral things. So I want to go into the things that are key. So if your child, whoever asked this question, your child or you are have ADD, you have the symptoms, there's a couple things you need to do, and this will make a difference. So I'm going to talk about the supplements, but first I want to talk about the diet. So the deficiency is crystal clear. There's an essential fatty acid deficiency, and that works for our brain. Those fatty acids help our brain become less inflamed. So the brain definitely gets inflamed and it gets stuck in overdrive. Because of the diet, in the diet for people that have ADD and ADHD is almost always the same. There's usually stimulants involved. Somewhere for the adults, there's like a caffeine addiction, a Red Bull addiction. There's something that they're plugging away for years, and creating a couple massive deficiencies. One of the biggest deficiencies is B vitamins.
Yeah.
So B vitamins, they are endogenous where your body can make them, but most of the time you're eating such junk that you destroy your gut's so out of balance, especially your microbiome, that you can't make them because you're supposed to have a bit of dysbiosis. Once you have dysbiosis, your good bacteria can't make the real B vitamins. So you develop all these deficiencies in your B vitamins. So B12, for example, is for dopamine. So that's for the emotional part of it. B1, blood sugar balance. B3, cognitive behavior. B6, memory. So all of these are the things that show up. You can't think, you can't remember things, you can't keep a focus, you can't stay on target. You got all these ideas going on, but you can't focus on them. Those are all B vitamin deficiencies. So for us, so when someone comes to my office, there's really three things I'm gonna recommend. Old school cod liver oil, even for kids, in copious amounts. We want to get at least 1,000 milligrams. So ideally like 3 twice a day. So to a decent amount. Then we're going to I use a very specific mineral. The minerals are usually burnt up. And that's a combination because of the hyperactivity. And so remember, there's a deficit disorder here. So they can't cognitively stay on top of things. And there's hyperactivity. And it's very frustrating for the individual, the poor little child or the adult, because they really can't accomplish much because of what they got, because of what's going on the inside. And it's a deficiency. So we got old school cod liver oil, copious amounts, something called Min-Tran. It's mineral and it leans in the direction of the yin minerals, which are all going to be depleted. And I dose those up pretty good. 5 at night, man, 7 at night, between 5 and 7 at night. They're just minerals, but we have to give the body and the mind an opportunity just to kind of calm down. And they'll help you sleep, which is nice, and which is usually for most ADHD. And then B vitamins, Cataplex B. That's our whole food multivitamin. It is a liver-based product, so you're literally getting a whole bunch of different rich nutrients, and especially those B vitamins. And those are water soluble too, so you need to get a fair amount of them in. Karen, what's amazing here is that if they get the supplements in and they do just start plowing them, they'll notice the difference. If they do the supplements in and back off the simple carbohydrates, because that's what's burning all this up. They back off the sugar, back off the carbohydrates.
And that's what they want a lot of the time, these kids. Yeah.
So here again, this is where it gets a little challenging. And I know it. I grew, this was my, growing up, my younger brother was 17 years younger than me, 16 years younger than me. And he had ADD, and we dealt with, I watched this just put a beat down on my parents, a beat down, because it was relentless. It was the behavior and everything. We're always, don't do this, do this, don't do that, don't do this. So as much as we can, we help that individual burn up some physical energy.
Yeah.
That's important. Adults, listen, if you think you're getting diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, listen, you go to Adderall, that's fine. You're going to feel like a brilliant genius for a little while. And you think there's a long-term play with that? The answer is no. Like, I don't want to tell you what's going to go on, but it's not going to work long-term. There's no 90-year-olds on Adderall, I'll tell you that right now. Like, it's going to work for you. It's going to create other issues with your brain. You're overriding the system there. So like, don't trade today's, I need to be more successful today's output for what's going to take place down the road. So those 3 different vitamins, and the diet's got to clean up. And that satiation is the issue. They constantly want a sugar source to keep the fire, keep stimulating their brain. Yeah. They can get that same thing. They can get satiated with fats. So leaning them like eggs and butter and, a burger, but not with the French fries. The best you can, do the best that you can. So you got 2 strong options here, but keep in mind what I say here. And this is probably the biggest message I always want to say with ADD and ADHD. You cannot fix biochemical imbalances with behavioral changes. And most of the time I see people trying to set up these, like, you got to do this and behave this way. And what do you say when all this, it's not going to work? You're going to sit there and you're going to burn out the dictionary's usage of stop and don't, and cut it back, cut it out. Don't stop there. Don't stop here. Like, all of that, you can't do it. And I know this firsthand. I've watched it for so many years, and I see a lot of little, people, I say little people, but even the adults that come in, go get them adjusted. Yeah. Literally, on my table, I watch those children change behavior. I give them an adjustment. We open up their thoracic spine. They always giggle. They think it's funny as can be because they hear all the popcorn, and their central nervous system, that section, T1 to T12, we give them an adjustment, poof. Right in that moment, the state of the nervous system changes. So if you haven't done that for your child or for you, if you're not getting that tension bound up because it's stuck in sympathetic dominance, and we got to swing that pendulum. If you do those things, I promise you, you'll see results, and then you can work and feed off of those results.
Yeah. No, awesome. Love it. And I think there's some strategies that people can use, right? I mean, you can usually get the kids to take some supplements, hopefully.
Yeah. So, and that'd be one of those scenarios, like, usually yes, but man, sometimes these children are even harder. And I just encourage the parents that figure it out, smush it up, put it in a smoothie, but somehow don't give up on it. Because otherwise there's ultimately, unfortunately, what happens a lot, you start to drug the kid until he's not a child anymore.
Yeah.
Zombie. How do I know that? Listen, my parents absolutely loved their son, my younger brother. Everything they had, they threw at it, but they didn't have a lot of knowledge. That's what they didn't. And they threw the medications at him. And year after year, I would observe my brother just become more and more numb to the world. And that's really, really what happened. And then finally, when I got into the health profession, it was one of the first things that I dove as deep as I possibly could. And immediately we made those changes. Immediately they paid dividends. Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, cool. Well, we're out of time. That went fast today. So moving into the last question, what is one action that our listeners can take to move them towards their goal of becoming superhuman?
So I was thinking about this today, and I'm thinking about my next, I think last week I told you there was 70 odd days left in the year.
Yeah, I know.
And it's on my mind a lot. So just real quickly here, because the last 60 days of the year is where most people will do the most detrimental, stuff. So let's go into January 1, prepared to be peaking on January 1. And that's what I got in my mind. My wife and I were talking about some different things. We're going to use our sauna for 30 days straight. We're going to do some really cool things to keep us focused and these next 60 days so we can, just keep leveling up. So think now, what other things you can do that you can have some fun with and play with. So it's almost like on January 1, it's that's game time.
Yeah.
Prepare to peak on January 1.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in again and for all your questions. If we didn't get to your question, we will get to it. I've written it down. We'll get to it next week. And we'll be back same time, same place for another episode of the Health Made Simple show.
Of course, you guys, appreciate all you guys coming along, and keep doing your thing, keep sharing out, keep spreading love. And of course, we'll take deliberate action for the mind, for the body, overall wellness. Y'all be awesome.